Adam, you might want to mention that about the swimming pool.
Oh, sure.
And that will be...
Right. Another thing I haven't mentioned yet, and I was going to get to it a little bit later, but one of the things that's an impact here is that our debt service for the swimming pool actually is in its last year. So you will experience somewhere between a $2 and $2.25 per thousand savings in that area next year. So the impact, for instance, for this one would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $2.50 per thousand would be the actual increase. Because one debt service is coming on, another debt service would be going on. So, so in that type of example, where it's currently $21.67, you'd be looking more in the range of $24 per thousand instead of $26 per thousand.
How long was the pool bonded for?
I'm sorry?
How long was the pool bonded for? What was the time frame on payout?
10 years.
Was it a 10 years? Yeah. The third option, and of course you will notice that some things didn't change on this one, is a 25-year where we put it all into rates. What you'll see with your annual debt service payments, that didn't change. Well, we're still paying in 25 years, so the debt service didn't change. We're still going to have to pay $420,000 per year over 25 years. Your annual debt service impact, of course, would be nothing because we're putting it all in rates. As far as the rates go, you can see that there's a little bit of change in the actual monthly base fee. It would be $8.62 here compared to $8.30 in the other two options. You will also see that the user rate goes up significantly. It goes from $6.75 per thousand gallons to $9.86 per thousand gallons would be your usage difference.
And the average use is about 4,000 gallons?
Yeah, right in that range, yeah.
What is the assumption as far as the interest rate? I was just trying to figure that out.
It's roughly, right now the SRF loans are actually better than our bond options. That's about 3 1/4. Okay. Just to give you an idea of where it was. That was as of December. Of course, it changes a little bit here and there, but that's where we were in December. Just to give you, these are some rough comments about some of the other options that we just saw. Of course, your property taxes, if you itemize your federal income taxes, your property taxes are deductible. So any portion that would be put into property taxes, if you itemize, would be a benefit from that perspective. You'd be able to deduct it from your federal income tax. In the, and just to give you a little bit more information, of course, as Bill said, what the current average sanitary bill is, it's roughly just over $26 per customer is the average. And as I said earlier, this does not affect your storm sewer rate, utility, or your water rate. It only affects your sanitary sewer rates, as it is a sanitary sewer utility issue. And as I said earlier, in order for us to be able to make the first debt service payment, we need to make a decision tonight so that we can draw up an ordinance for the next meeting so we can start to move forward on the process of actually collecting the money to make that first payment. Or we run into the danger of not having the money to actually make that payment when it comes to it.
I would like to add a comment here in that when we were going through the process of the engineers coming in and designing this, we spent a lot of time trying to shave costs but still have a plant that would stand up. And we made some major changes to the first design in order to save $2 million. So we were trying hard to stay within the regulations that the DNR required and still have a plant that will last 25, 28 years that could be maintained. So your council has worked hard to try really hard not to spend any more money than they absolutely had to. And we had to secure land, we had to do a lot of things, and Adam has worked very hard to get that job done to get us to the point where we are. So we appreciate you being here tonight very much.
I'd like to add, I think there's a lot of people, or everybody knows that this project has to get paid for. But I did get several calls over the past week since the paper had the article in it, and most everybody that had spoken to me was in favor of doing it in rate increases across the board because of our current tax levy.
One thing that just going rate increases only and not including the property tax values, for the person that's on a fixed income and let's say of modest, very modest means, going by rate only is going to roughly double that person's sewer rate, roughly from 26 up to 50 some dollars. Whereas if we go with the combination of the two, it won't impact that lower income person quite as much. Would you agree with that, Adam? We talked about that this afternoon. My feeling is that the rate only would be somewhat of a regressive tax, whereas if we did the combination of the two, it would take into consideration, if somebody's property is worth more, that they will be paying more, but perhaps, could, possibly afford it as well.
There's also one added risk too. What you collect in rate usage is not a guarantee. And if we see a significant reduction in consumption, the debt still has to be paid for. And we run the risk of, you run more risk of putting it into rates than you do into a base rate.
I'm just representing the people that called me and told me how they felt about the situation and to address it tonight.
I probably had about 5 or 6 calls, and that's what they told me too, to put on rates.
How do you folks feel?
Well, I got one thing to say right off the bat. I'm not so sure about your numbers. I actually think it's cheaper. Who ran your numbers on your loan? $6 million
I
loan.
ran them through Snyder, and I've ran them through Ruin Securities, who actually does the loan processing. You have to remember that there is more of it than just $6 million. There is a 10% requirement by the state of an overreach. There's also the cost associated with going through the loan services and paying for the actual servicing process. So there are costs outside of just the flat fee for the actual plant itself that have to be built in.
I guess I still have to take issue with it. Can you put back that screen that said the 25-year plan or whatever? Can you do that?
I can do that.
Can you do that? Yeah,
It should be on there.
Thanks. Because the numbers that you ran, just on this plan right here, they actually, is this assuming the 3.25%?
That is assuming the 3.25%. Yes.
Well, if you borrow the $6 million, as an
It would be
assumption,
more than $6 million.
but let's say that you've been using 6, so let's just use that right this second. And if you times that times 3.25%, interest payment on that for the first year would be $195,000. That interest rate, as you paid your assumption, your annual debt payment of $419,000, the first payment would be roughly half of it would be interest and half of it would be principal. As you keep going along down the line, your interest rate will shrink because you're paying on your principal. So, and when I run your rate, the mistake that I see was made is if you take what I said as your interest, $195,000, and you times that times 25,000 or 25 years. I'm sorry. Let's speed that up. But hold on. That's 0.0325. If you times that number times 25 years, the assumption of the length of that, it ends up being $4,875,000. Now, if you add that to your original $6 million that you originally borrowed as your assumption, you add that together, you get $10,875,000. And if you divide that back by your 25 years, it ends up being $435,000, which is roughly close to this, which is, again, what I would say would be wrong, because you're assuming you're paying $195,000. In what I just ran through there, you're assuming you spent, or you were paying $195,000 for all 25 years, and you're not. If you borrow, if you buy what I'm saying, if you borrow $6 million at 3.25%, and it's $195,000, you would actually times that times 12.5 years, half the length of your payment for your loan. That equals $2,437,500. You add that to your original $6 million, which, like you say, may go up a little.